Welcome, Jessica. Thanks for joining me today on the Ontario Food Protections podcast, Coffee Time Chat.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks for having me tonight. I appreciate the time you're spending on this.
Oh, we appreciate it. Jessica, you are the Delivery Partner and Relationship Manager for BRC Global Standards. We want to kind of take a little deep dive and learn about you and shine the light on you today. So can you tell us about your company and your current role at BRC Global Standards?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I'm the Delivery Partner Relationship Manager for BRCGS. So I guess I will start just by sort of giving you a bit of an overview on what we do as a company.
Sure.
So basically, we are one of the big GFSI CPOs. So we provide GFSI benchmarked programs which cover food safety, quality, and regulatory compliance. We also provide similar programs to support things like logistics, manufacture of packaging, agents and brokers, as well as retailers. And then we've also moved into the space of specialty claim verification. So things like gluten-free and plant-based certification. So basically the way it works is that we develop and maintain the standards with input from industry stakeholders. And then we work with about just over 75 certification bodies. So you'll know who, PJR FSI is because, Paul Demarin sits on the board.
Yeah.
So companies like his, exactly. Companies like his and others to go out, and they employ the auditors who actually go out and they execute the audits to the standards. So that's kind of our core business is the standards. But the other thing that we do is we provide tools to improve performance as well as demonstrate assurance through a host of training options as well as events that we run throughout the year. And then we also offer intelligence and analytics tools to sort of manage risk and provide supply chain insight. So you could kind of say we're a one-stop shop when it comes to supply chain assurance needs.
Awesome. Yeah, I did check that out. I've, of course, heard of BRC for many years there. And it was neat to see that there was quite a lot of, more of the offering than just when I always hear my customers freaking out about the audits.
Yes.
That's the main kind of thing to get that certification, but the training and the resources is really what was kind of opening my eyes. And I was curious to see that how you guys have it. Do you have to be all in, or is it a la carte?
There are definitely some things that are a la carte. So, obviously, let's just take a food site, for example, if a food site has their audit, there are certain things that they get just as part of their certification. So we have just as an example, we've got a platform called Participate, and that houses basically a library of documents, guidance, material, webinars, and all of that kind of stuff. That's available to any of our BRCGS certified sites, just as part of being certified. But then there are some other things that, a non-BRCGS site might want to have. So there's, different training options. So we've got, the typical product safety courses, like we've got HACCP courses, we've got, risk assessment courses, root cause analysis, all of that kind of stuff. So those things would be available to anybody. And then we also have other things, like our food safety culture excellence module, which again, fits really well into a BRCGS site, but it could technically be used by anybody. So it's kind of a mixture of things.
Interesting. You got a long history in the food industry and where you've gotten today. I was just curious if you could give one piece of information to somebody who's newly joining the food industry. What would you give them for a piece of advice?
Yeah, that's a
Set
tough
them up for
one.
success. What did you find that stuck out to you in your journey?
Yeah. I would say if I were to go with somebody in the manufacturing environment, because I spent a lot of time in manufacturing before I joined BRCGS, and I think one thing that I really learned there, and that I would give anybody who is just starting out in that type of role, like a QA, food safety technician, or whatnot type of role, would be spend a lot of time on the production floor. I think that not enough people in those types of roles really pay a lot of attention to the floor. They go down there and all that kind of stuff, but I think it's so important to, ask lots of questions, learn about the equipment, learn about the processes, stand back and just watch and just observe. Ask people questions that work on the line, ask why things are being done a certain way and challenge those things if it doesn't make sense. I think being hands-on and spending time like this will allow somebody to much more quickly be able to identify risks and implement positive changes if necessary. So yeah, I think, for me, when I learned that I was going to learn much more on the floor than, sort of sitting at a desk learning things, that was eye-opening for me.
I couldn't agree with you more. I deal with so many, quality people, sanitation, just general managers, everything. And the amount of times that they come to me and then they, tell me there's an issue, but they can't describe it because they haven't looked into it first.
Yes.
It's just kind of
exactly.
mind blowing. They just pass the information on to somebody else, and then they say go look into it. And then you've wasted so much time trying to figure out what it is by going back and forth. And whenever we're dealing with like a new plant startup or anything in that, we always say, make sure you're on the floor, make sure you know it better than the person who's actually, operating that machine, doing that job, because if not, they should be teaching you. And that's it's hard sometimes to get people to go out on the floor because unfortunately, they went to school, they got the office job, and hey, the floor, I don't know. But yeah, I think
cold and wet and damp down there.
exactly. I mean, it's not the prettiest sight sometimes, but it's what it takes to feed the to feed everybody. So it's definitely very beneficial. So you've had like I said, I mentioned before, a long journey in the food safety game. Starting out, I think your whole career's been basically food safety. So where did you start, and then what was your journey to where you are today? If we took a look, and and would you say that your journey kind of followed your advice?
Yeah, so I actually went to school so I didn't see myself in this position when I first started this journey. So I took environmental technology in school. So, I thought I was going to go out and save the world in a different way, saving the environment. However, a lot of the science behind environmental technology and food science is very, very similar. So I actually, my first job out of school was at an environmental and food testing laboratory. So we did a lot of chemistry and micro testing for both in the food industry and environmental. And that's where I kind of got a little bit more exposure to the food industry. So with the testing, we also offered some consulting services. And so that occasionally brought me into some of the production facilities that we were working with. And again, I sort of got a little bit of a taste of what the manufacturing environment was like. And then from there, I kind of, dabbled in some HACCP courses and, took some other food safety courses. And then I just kind of went off in that direction. And so from there, I went to manufacturing. I worked with a couple of different large manufacturers, here in Canada, and helped them get GFSI certification and improve their food safety systems. got so, the time that I spent at those manufacturing facilities, I think was so invaluable to me in terms of quickly learning the industry. And then I sort of flipped and went to the other side of things. So, I was at one time sitting on the other side of the table being audited and having my programs audited. And then, now I'm learning a whole new thing in terms of helping to create those standards that are being audited for. So I guess you could say I've sort of seen many different avenues of the food industry.
Well, you've come full circle, and it seems like you're very well rounded. So yeah, that's fantastic. And like I said, the advice is, that information you gave us before of how you started, and obviously that willingness to learn, that willingness to be ambitious, really get out on the floor and, kind of learn everything about your craft versus just standing back or sitting in an office and doing just that one aspect of your role. I can see how that makes you extremely valuable and has allowed you to move on in your career. So this year, obviously, we've seen lots of challenges. COVID, of course, has, done a huge number on everything. How has your company adapted and adjusted or, overcome said challenges with regards to the distancing, the lockdowns, and, just one of those things that has not made it so accessible to be around people when we have such an in-person and on the floor type role?
Yeah. So it was a huge challenge for the food industry in general, and for certifications, it completely changed and made us question how we were going to continue to be able to offer certifications to the industry, because as most audits happen on the floor. So
Yes.
What happens when you can't get auditors into sites to be able to do those audits? So we had to look at so many different things. We had to look at how can we involve remote assessments or ICT, whether that be a blended approach. So where sites were able to have some on-site visits, but maybe, limiting it a little bit. So sort of half and half, half remote, half on-site, to also those sites that just couldn't have anybody on-site all around. And so how do we be able to offer them certification just doing a strictly remote audit? And then, of course, we even had sites that they couldn't do any of those things. So, they were in very, very rural areas, or vulnerable populations. And so they just weren't able to have anybody on site, and they didn't have the Wi-Fi to be able to have even remote audits. So, I mean, the challenges, those were the challenges that were kind of thrown at us. It was like, how are we going to continue to be able to offer assurance to the supply chain, that food safety certifications are still being, still happening, but also, knowing that in some cases it just wasn't going to be possible. So, so we just had to come up with a whole bunch of different flexible solutions and be able to say, okay, well, if you can do this, then here's your option. If you can do this or that, here's option B. So yeah, I think it was just
Are you able to share any examples of how you overcame those? You've listed the challenges, but none of the actual how you overcame any. It's okay if you can't share, but if you want, I'm sure our viewers would want to know.
Yeah. So, I mean, those options that I talked about are exactly what we did. So, option A was always, if you can get an on-site audit, that's the best solution. Yeah. And then, of course, if there was some reason why you couldn't have an on-site audit, the blended approach would be the most appropriate in that case. And so for that situation, it would be document review. And then within 30 days later, they would have an on-site auditor go in and do the audit. And then the option for if none of that could take place was that we were doing fully remote audits. The challenge there is that fully remote audits aren't GFSI accepted. So then we had to, also make it known that this needs to be acceptable to customers. And in most cases, if that was the only option, people, they liked that. It was better than nothing. So yeah, we did a lot of working groups. We got a lot of feedback from our stakeholders to try to, see what everybody, was sort of good with and accepting, because obviously, we could think something's a good idea and then throw it out there, and it's just absolutely not going to work for the industry. So it was a lot of communication.
Nice. So going back to your role in the food safety, industry here in the food game, what was your eureka moment? You mentioned, you went into the environmental at first. How long into your career or starting off did you say, hold on a second, the science is so similar. I really like this, hey, I enjoy it every day. We're making sure and helping to ensure that the food that leaves these facilities is safe to eat and, good for, obviously safe for human consumption. So it does obviously kind of warm you inside. But do you remember your eureka moment when you decided that, hey, you kind of found your calling?
I don't know if it was so much of if it was one moment or if it was just, I had come, I think, to a point in my role where there was kind of a fork in the road, and I was either going to, continue with going down the lab path, which, yep, don't get me wrong, I'm a lab rat at heart, and but it was either that or, I was kind of craving something a little bit different. And I just sort of took what I knew and, realized that, hey, I've got, this other training in HACCP and starting to sort of get these food safety courses under my belt. Why don't I just try going, to the food industry? And it's just, after that, it's history. I did a little bit of lab work when I was at that first manufacturing facility that I worked with, and it was just such a natural progression, I guess you could say, in terms of the stepping stone from the lab to the food industry.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like you invested the time. You learned so much, and at that point, are you going to start over? Are you going to shift, whatever it may be? It sounds like you continued that path, and you kept getting rewarded for it, and obviously you enjoyed it. So awesome. Right now, we're seeing a big change with emerging markets and things like that, and stuff that currently hasn't even been out there. You mentioned kind of the allergies to gluten, and all the time we're seeing more regulations with those and stuff like that. One of the questions I'm always wondering is, have you heard of anything with regards to the craft beer industry and how any regulations or anything is falling in that? Because that's something that has just exploded recently. And I think there's over like 400 of them now in Ontario here alone. And they're just kind of like, off to the side. They're not, they get like a health inspector check or something like that. But I was just curious, is BRC have they kind of, looked into that or thought about some of these emerging new markets? And is there programs that are being developed or already have been developed? Because I think, a lot of people are going to want to be proactive in that sense if they're going to run into it down the road. And history has said it's probably going to happen once the output gets to that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a really good question. And, whether it be these craft breweries or other sort of small startup manufacturers, because we obviously have all kinds of sort of specialty foods, and they all sort of start off in these like similar smaller facilities with public health inspections, and they're not quite ready for a full-fledged, say, GFSI, BRCGS audit. And, that's okay. It takes time to get there. One of the things that we've done is we have a program, it's called the START program. And it is basically, it's almost like a mini BRCGS or food audit. So it takes the principles of the full food standard, but it takes it down down a couple of notches. But then what the site can do is they can, so first time around, they would get like basic level start. And that's sort of your basic HACCP principles, your basic food safety principles. And then they can work on it. So then the next year, they would get the intermediate level. So that kind of adds that next layer of requirements. And then the idea is that after a couple of years of doing this, then they would be ready for a full-fledged food safety audit. So that's kind of what we've done to sort of help those emerging markets and those smaller guys along without overwhelming them. We're sort of trying to set them up for success.
Awesome. Yeah. I was just curious about that. I get asked that a lot. A lot of the times, these guys, they will just be developing programs just to train their people. And,
Right.
They'll actually be creating SOPs without even realizing it in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, is that for your, your document, for your books and everything? And they're just like, what are you talking about? This is just so, they know what to do when they're doing their job. And I was like, well, you're actually starting something that you may not realize. And I said,
Yeah.
if you keep growing like this, eventually I'm going to come in here and say congratulations, because, you're getting visited by more people. That means you're doing a better job, and more people are looking into making sure that what you're doing is safe. So no, that's fantastic. I think a lot of people out there need to be aware of that, because these small startups, they're running around like crazy. But, it's the things that can actually stop them from producing that they really need to pay attention to when that time comes.
And I think the other thing to recognize there is that for those smaller startups, it gives them an advantage when they're going to, the bigger retailers and trying to sell their product into those customers. A lot of those retailers and specifiers are going to want some sort of food safety program. So, at least with something like this, they're on the road, they're getting there, and it's something that they can use, to their advantage, to say, what, we do care about food safety, and we're on our way.
Awesome. Well, that was good to, like I said, learn a lot about kind of where you've come from, what your role has been here, and kind of the path you've taken. And now this is what we're calling our BOD, Board of Director Spotlights. So wanted to kind of find out, what got you wanting to be involved with the OFPA, and, what have you kind of learned and or, kind of been surprised with? What are you looking forward to? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I guess the reason why I got involved with the OFPA was because when I was sort of beginning my career, and a little bit earlier, even back to my lab days, I used to attend the OFPA events. And I found them, so useful. Whether it be the networking aspect of it, meeting other people in the industry that I could sort of bounce ideas off of or learn from, going to the events and listening to, to the educational sessions, all of that kind of stuff. I just found it, I'd always found it really useful. So when I had the opportunity to join on the board, I wanted to jump at that opportunity, just mostly so that I could give back. So, I be able to give back to other, whether it be new people to the industry or, people that have been in the industry for years, just, sort of be able to come full circle and provide a service back to the industry, I guess.
Awesome. Hey, it's a great response. Have to say pretty much the same thing. Came in from attending and obviously being a vendor at a lot of the shows, meeting, networking, forming relationships. And I just feel, the more I learn, the more I can help people. It just increases the overall value, and it's a win-win. So
yeah, absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah, and you talk about relationships. I mean, there are, I've got some very strong relationships that I still to this day, am really close with, who I have met at OFPA events, back 15 years ago. So I think that's a really good point, the relationship aspect of it.
Anyone who made a significant impact in your journey or your career, or even your time at the OFPA?
I will say Nadia was the one who brought me in. She's the one who, let me know that the opportunity was available. So I would
Shout
definitely
out
say,
Nadia, our president.
shout out to Nadia. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, there's definitely others that along the way that have sort of helped and mentored me. I could probably go on and on listing them. So
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking this time and providing us the opportunity to learn more about you and what you do with regards to BRCGS. Just want to tell everybody to please check out our website ofpa.ca. We do have our fall event coming up on November 18th. Please register if you haven't already registered. We have a great lineup of speakers. We're going to have a draw. We have prizes. It's going to be, in person. We are really hoping for. Obviously, we don't have that crystal ball, but that is the goal at this time. Jessica, is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off today?
No, just thank you very much for your time, and I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and I look forward to future discussions with you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.